This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, folks, very good. So we're here in chapter 4, and we're looking at the study of tissues, organs, and organ systems. So I'm going to scoot forward in our PowerPoint. Okay. All right, so what I'm showing you here, I just moved forward in the PowerPoint. Don't get with that, it's okay. Because we talked about the body systems. So let's look at them. Let's look at a little bit of the slides that I have prepared here, only a few, regarding body systems and such. But this also is important to see in that you're looking at what goes on as far as the organ system and the organ, tissues, and the cells that comprise the tissues. So it's just kind of give you a little bit of that part when we talked about the structural organization of the human body. Okay? So we're looking at here the organism. Here we're looking at an organ from an organ system, the digestive system, the stomach. And then we're looking at some tissue and tissues really, that the stomach is comprised of. You'll see here that we have epithelial tissue, connective tissue, muscle, and nerve. So quite interesting that the 4 primary tissues, epithelial tissue, connective tissue, muscle, and nerve, all 4 of these primary tissues are being represented in this organ as well as all the other organs in the human body. So the 4 primary tissues are epithelial tissue, connective tissue, muscle tissue, and nervous tissue. And know that with all of these 4 types of tissue, there are different, except for the nervous tissue really, because we have broken down, but there's different types of these types of tissues. Go ahead.
You're saying these are the 4 primary tissues that make up each organ?
And that make up the whole human body. Yep, the 4 primary tissues. And we're going to learn that there are different types of epithelial tissue, there are different types of connective tissue. Right? So we're going to learn that connective tissue, we would consider the blood a fluid connective tissue. So that's a type of connective tissue. Which is kind of weird, to be honest, when you think about it, but it's considered a connective tissue, and we'll talk about that. So epithelial, connective, muscle, and nerve. So let's look here. Epithelial tissue provides protection, transport, secretion, and absorption. Those are the functions, the basic functions of epithelial tissue. Connective tissue provides structural support. And so, like bone, connective tissue. Blood, connective tissue, fluid connective tissue. Cartilage, a type of connective tissue. There are tissues that help to secure your organs in place, and there are types of connective tissue. What you're seeing here is areolar type of connective tissue, and so that is a type of tissue that's keeping all of, we can call it a packing tissue. It's a type of tissue that's keeping all of the organs in place, secure. Muscle provides movement. There are 3 different types. Skeletal. When the skeletal muscle contracts, what is it moving? The skeleton. Hence the term skeletal muscle. So skeletal muscle, cardiac muscle, and smooth muscle. 3 different types of muscle tissue. Cardiac, skeletal, cardiac, smooth muscle. So think the organs of your body, think the blood vessels of your body, smooth muscle. And then nervous tissue. So nervous tissue, communication, coordination, and control. So your brain, spinal cord, all the nerves of the body, nervous tissue. You know, different roles, different parts of the nervous system, we would call it. So like your brain and spinal cord are a certain part of the nervous system called the central nervous system. Everything other than the brain and the spinal cord is considered the peripheral nervous system and different roles and functions. And we'll talk about that, absolutely. I hope that after you've taken this course, you have more respect for the complexity of the human body and realize how amazing it is that we're not sick every day of our life. Seriously. Because it's remarkable. Honestly, I think it's miraculous how our body is able to keep us well for most of the time of our lives. And really, like I said, I'll make comments about comic books. Wolverine. You guys know Wolverine, right? So Wolverine, he's got the healing factor. Well, we all have healing factor within us. We get cut, don't we heal? Now, if we have diabetes or some other type of illness, is it slower in healing? Sadly, yes. But still, we heal on our own. You know, we damage our blood vessels, we damage the tissue, and we're able to heal. Even in the nervous system, it heals. Now, unfortunately, if we damage the spinal cord, you know, there's healing that takes place, but it's not the healing that's going to allow for you to have renewed movement. If you damage the spinal cord in the neck, the cervical region, you're not going to be able to move distally, right? So, quadriplegia. But still know that there's damage, and then there's healing as far as scar tissue. It's just not the healing that we want. But other parts of the body, healing takes place, and we're able to be good as new. How many of us have cuts on our bodies that you see a little scar, and that's about it? But you've healed. Your body's moved on after a period of time. How about bones? Anybody fracture a bone? Right? Break a bone at all? I have, and some of you all have. And remarkable that not only does it heal, but that area where you fractured is actually stronger than the surrounding area. So it's pretty cool. It's pretty remarkable. So here you're seeing represented some of the body systems. The skin, the integumentary system with its associated glands and such, and we'll talk more about that. The nervous system, the muscular, skeletal, circulatory, also known as the cardiovascular system, including the heart and the blood vessels. The endocrine system, think like your thyroid gland, right? Hormones that are produced in your body, they're produced by a gland, so say a thyroid gland, and then sent out into the blood throughout all parts of the body. The lymphatic system, working with your cardiovascular system to provide an immune response. Really cool, amazing what it can do. The respiratory system, the digestive system, urinary reproductive system. You know, we know the basic functions of these, and we'll learn them on more details. But yeah, so pretty remarkable, these body systems. You'll see here, as far as, let me look at this. Okay, we're going to go back now to the beginning of the PowerPoint. I don't know, let's see. Maybe I'll just scoot like this. Do you know how to start from the beginning? I don't know with this. I had it pretty much. Okay. All right, so as we're looking at this chapter here, and we're studying tissue, so go back to the very beginning of the PowerPoint. So tissues are comprised of cells. We talked about that already, right? A group of similar cells. Well, one type of, and the primary type of tissue is the four, epithelial tissue. We said that it is a covering, a protective barrier, epithelial tissue. When you think of your skin, right, it's a type of epithelial tissue. I said there are many types of epithelial tissue, okay? Stratified squamous, multiple layer, squamous type of cells. They're weird kind of pancake type shaped cells. These make up and comprise your skin, your integument. Covering, lining. You'll see here the terms simple, pseudo, and stratified. So simple epithelium, one layer. Stratified, more than one. So two or more layers. Okay? Pseudo-stratified, it appears to be layered, but it's not. And the reason for this is that it has this appearance, and you'll see that the nuclei can kind of look like they're in different layers, but they're not. That's that pseudo-stratified. You'll see this in the respiratory system and such. Looking at slides, we'll have opportunity to do this. Looking at them and trying to identify these different types of slides. In anatomy and physiology, our students have to do this. You all don't. You just have to know the basics of epithelial tissue. It can be really quite challenging, actually. But these are the types and how we name epithelial tissue. Whether there's one layer or multiple layers, or it looks like it's multiple layers and it's not, it's that pseudo-stratified. So how about this? Why would I need multiple layers of cells for a tissue? Well, think about your skin. Really, you're not seeing it, but if you've ever looked and seen like sunlight coming into a room, and you see those particles in the air, that's many times it's our skin. Our skin cells sloughing off, coming off, and being present within the air. Okay? So our skin cells. They are continually acting as a protective barrier. New cells are built up, old cells are sloughing off and dying. And really, your skin, the outer layer is all dead cells. It's not live cells. Just like your hair. Inside, it's alive. But outside, anything that you're seeing outside, it's dead. This is why you can go get a haircut, right? Get a haircut, and you're not like, stop lying. Because it's not live. Only what's deep within your skin, that's what's not. Okay? So, simple layers, one layer has its purpose, right? One layer can allow for material to move through. So how about in the respiratory system? Well, we want oxygen to pass from the respiratory system and into the blood for blood cells to move oxygen to the tissues of the cells and tissues of the body, right? Or we're letting off CO2 from the blood into the lungs so that we can actually, but you need like a very thin barrier, a thin layer. That's one layer is a good thing. Multiple layers for protection, like your skin, that's also a good thing. So do you see how this is something that you'll learn now, and we'll see it throughout the human body, is that structure, anatomy, dictates function, physiology. Write that down. Structure. So when you think anatomy, think structure. So when you think anatomy, think structure. So the human body, the anatomical parts, the structures. When you think physiology, how do all these parts work? That's physiology. I'll write it down for you here on the board. So we have anatomy, physiology. Anatomy, structure, physiology, function. How do the parts work? Those parts, those anatomical parts? Well, physiology. So here in this class, we will be studying anatomy and physiology. Just, I call it anatomy and physiology light. So for us non-science majors here in the class, that's all good. Okay? And I'm on this. So, good stuff. And here, this is present within within the PowerPoint. You'll see here that we have simple, there are squamous, cuboidal, and columnar. So this is interesting. So not only do we have layers of cells, or not, or looking like it but not, right? But we also have these shapes. So squamous kind of looks like this. And on the side, so if I'm looking top down, it almost looks like a pancake, okay? Or if I'm looking at it from the side, it's very thin. Okay? Squamous. Cuboidal looks like a cube. The circle represents the nucleus. Columnar looks like a column, like a rectangle. So squamous, cuboidal, columnar. Sneeze. Thank you. Thank you. Right. And you'll see the locations of whether they're simple one layer or multiple layers, or look like they're multiple layers or not. So simple one layer, think blood vessels, think the air sacs in the lungs, the alveoli. Think ducts, which produce secretions. Think the surfaces of the ovary, the eye, one layer. The stomach, the intestines, the uterus, one layer. Just different types of shapes of those one-layered cells. Multiple layers, think the skin, the mouth, the throat, the vagina. Multiple layers, right? They allow for the removal of certain layers to protect from damage. The cuboidal, the columnar, think the sweat glands, think the urethra, other types of salivary glands. Okay? And then think in the respiratory system, throat, nasal passages, sinuses, trachea. The genital ducts present within the male for these pseudostratified. Okay? As far as glands are concerned, so glands actually produce secretions. Okay? So here's a simple one that you can think of. How about a salivary gland, right, that produces saliva, or a sweat gland? We mentioned both of those just now, right? Produces sweat. Right? How about mucus glands, right? These types of mucus-producing tissue, mucosal, right? Produces this mucus as a protective barrier. So, like in your respiratory system, in your digestive system, your stomach produces very strong acids. What prevents those acids from eating away at the stomach lining? Mucus. Very thick mucus. But mucus is what protects that. The endocrine glands, they're actually producing hormones, like I said, thyroid hormone. So when you think thyroid hormone, think of a hormone that really goes to all the body tissues, not just some, all. And if we have a high level of thyroid hormone being produced, we would say it's hyperthyroid. Someone who has hyperthyroidism, their eyes are bulging, They're jacked. They're always like hyper. They're sweating. They're really thin. Hyperthyroidism. It's as if you took the accelerator of the body. So think of the accelerator on your car. What happens when I push it all the way down? The car's moving, right? It's going pretty fast. Think if we were to take the accelerator of the human body, push it to the floor, that would be hyperthyroidism. Hypothyroidism, right? There's terms that we'll use for these, but I'm not going to give them to you right now. Hypothyroidism, it's as if you took your foot pretty much almost all the way off of the accelerator, and it's just like, so today I'm driving to work, and I'm running a little late, and I'm on back roads. I live in Pennsylvania, and you're one lane road that I'm driving through, and I'm behind an older gentleman who's going 5 to 10 miles under the speed. I'm like, buddy. But imagine hypothyroidism. You're just like pressing on the accelerator just a little bit, right? And they're just kind of moving along. Your body is really not functioning like it should, whether it's accelerated or not. So it can be really quite a challenge. I need to take a cough drop. Talking throughout the day in student services. I'm talking with my mask on in student services. Throat gets very dry. Connective tissue. So I mentioned to you regarding epithelial tissue, what goes on. What about connective tissue? So with connective tissue, I have to take a break. I apologize. I'm going to turn the mic off. You guys have like 10 minutes, and then we'll continue. Those of you online will begin class in about 5 minutes. And we'll resume class in 5 minutes. Sorry. Finish up and continue with the connective tissue. All right, folks, so let's get back into the PowerPoint here and continue on for the day. So we're looking at the different types of tissues. So we looked at epithelial tissue, connective tissue. We'll have loose and dense connective tissue. Loose connective tissue, flexible, right? Providing coverings of organs, providing keeping the organs in place and kind of like a packing tissue, we would say. Whereas dense connective tissue, when you think dense connective tissue, think your tendons and your ligaments, okay? Your tendons and your ligaments, think dense connective tissue. So a tendon connects a muscle to a bone. Skeletal muscle, how is it anchored to the bone? Via tendons. How about the ligaments? Ligaments are holding the bones together. So at joints, ligaments are present in order to keep a joint tight in place. Here you're seeing the different types of connective tissue. And you see here cartilage, bone, fat, blood, all types of connective tissue and very important roles in the body. When we're looking at cartilage, it provides a barrier, a cushion for resisting compression. So how about between, so if you look in the back there, if we look at our two skeletons that we have here, you'll see that between each of these vertebral discs, vertebral bodies are vertebral discs. That's fibrous type of fibrocartilage, very tough, durable cartilage that allows for shock absorption and really prevents damage to the vertebrae. If you've ever known anybody who's had a depressed disc, they're not having a problem. Because what happens is that as a result of that compression of the disc, it affects the space between the vertebrae, and those spaces between the vertebrae allow for nerve roots to come on, spinal nerve roots, and also the spinal cord and center, and any kind of compression or irritation to that can cause weakness. Absolutely. So cartilage, very important. How about the cushion that's present for the knees? The menisci, the meniscus, right? That's also a fibro-type cartilage. Very tough, durable type of a cartilage. Okay? Bone, we have an idea. We look at those skeletons back there and see that they provide a protective barrier for the skull, right? For the brain, the spine, for the spinal cord, right? The thoracic cavity, thoracic cage for the lungs, the heart, right? Very important organs protected by bones, okay? And allow for levers, allow for structures that muscle can anchor onto to allow for movement of the human body. Adipose tissue provides a cushion, provides a barrier, protective. It also provides nutrients if needed. Okay? Adipose tissue, fat. Blood, what does it do? Contains blood cells, contains other different substances that we'll go over in quite a bit of detail that will allow for the ability for us to transport nutrients, transport oxygen, transport carbon dioxide, do a lot of things, transport hormones. This is the blood, very important. Provides life. Here you can see examples of different types of connective tissue. And you'll see with connective tissue, it's different than epithelial tissue. Let me show you something interesting here. We'll come back to this. Right there. Look at these examples of epithelial tissue. Do you see how the cells are all tightly packed? Epithelial tissue, tightly packed cells. Now, let's go over to epithelial tissue. It's a little different. You have a matrix present, and then you have cells interspersed within the matrix. You don't see a concentration of just all cells, do you? With connective tissue. No, you're seeing this matrix, and then these cells are interspersed within the matrix. It's different than epithelial tissue. Cartilage, bone, fat, blood, all examples of connective tissue. Muscle. I said to you that there are three types of muscle. skeletal, cardiac, and smooth muscle, right? So really important to see that 3 different types of muscle, 3 different types of function. So the heart, let's find the heart here. So here we have an example of a heart, okay? And so what you're looking at here is that there are 4 chambers, 2 upper chambers, 2 lower chambers, and these will move blood throughout the body. So you have 2 pumps, okay? You have a right-sided pump and a left-sided pump. Right-sided pump sends blood to the lungs. Left-sided pump pumps blood throughout the whole body. Okay? So really important, 2 pumps present within the heart comprise of cardiac muscle. Very unique type of a muscle, cardiac muscle, okay? So cardiac muscle, the heart. Smooth muscle, think the organs of the body, right, that you have no control. I can't think of smooth muscle and go, I want to contract that muscle. Weird, right? But skeletal muscle, I think about it and I can move it, right? I can move my muscles. Those are skeletal muscles. You have voluntary control over skeletal muscle. You don't have control over smooth muscle. So the muscles of the stomach, I don't have control over that. The muscles of the abdomen, as far as like, so you can contract like a crunch, skeletal muscle. The stomach, the organ stomach, you don't have conscious control over that. Smooth muscle. So you see here, skeletal, smooth, cardiac muscle. And cardiac muscle, again, it's that pumping muscle of the heart that allows for those 2 pumps to move the blood throughout the body. And they all look unique, different. Nervous tissue. So we went over epithelial, connective, muscle, and now we're looking at nervous tissue. So nervous tissue is very similar to connective tissue in that there's a lot of cells, but it's not like epithelial tissue where they're all next to each other. In nervous tissue, we'll have neurons, nerve cells, and then we'll have support cells, which will help the nerve cells do their job. So nerve cells communicate with each other so that they can allow for you to have your ability to think, right? Your cognitive ability. That's nerve cells, neurons. The support cells of those neurons, they aid in the function of and help you provide nutrition for those neurons, those nerve cells. So when I say a nerve cell, I'm really trying to tell you a neuron. You've heard that word used before, I'm sure, a neuron. Right? Those are the important cells within the brain, within the spinal cord, that if they're damaged, that's a problem. They don't regenerate. We're going to talk about the basic functions of the neurons as far as that they have these dendrites and an axon. Okay? And we're going to talk about that. The axon is going to carry information away from the nerve cell body. The dendrite is going to carry information to the nerve cell body. Okay? This is some cool stuff. Only a couple slides here with the stem cells, but know that this regenerative medicine, this is a big deal. This is what they're working on. They're doing a lot of research, trying to take these stem cells, which can become other types of cells. They can differentiate. Right? This would be a good thing. So when we damage nerve cells, and they're damaged, so the spinal cord gets damaged, you're a paraplegic, you're a quadriplegic, depending upon where the spinal cord has been damaged. Can we use stem cells in order to fix and repair and promote healing? Well, not yet, but they're working on that. That would be great. That we could help folks who have been in accidents. I'm thinking of someone who we know, my family, friends of ours, a relative of theirs was in a traumatic car accident, big major car accident, and he's left a quadriplegic as a result of being hit. He was just driving, and someone, terrible accident. Young man, he's only in his late 40s, and now he's in a wheelchair the rest of his life. That's devastating. How about folks that are in war or as a result of living in a war-torn country? Soldiers, people who are just residents of a war-torn country, and they have all these traumatic injuries. Wouldn't it be wonderful to be able to use stem cells in order to promote healing and allow for them to, live a new life again? It's tough stuff. I'll tell you this regarding what we do right now as far as stem cells are concerned. So, breast cancer. My mother suffered from breast cancer and had one of her breasts removed. This is going back a few years ago. And sad stuff. She ended up getting an implant, and she had to go through different types of treatment, and she's still, even to this day, on a pill, I think, like once a month, as a result of, to keep the cancer at bay. Tough stuff. Well, what they're doing right now is they're able to, and it's newer technology, like in Japan they were doing this, and in the United States now also, working to take the tissue, right, from the adipose tissue, the fat from the breast of a woman, from her own body, the fat from her body, as far as they do like a liposuction, and take that fat from her own body, right? So it's an autograft, it's coming from her own body, and they take the area where the breast tissue has been removed, and they put this fat with these fat stem cells into that tissue, and the woman is able to fill out the skin where the breast was. Now, it's not breast tissue, so she wouldn't be able to breastfeed a baby, right? Because it's not breast tissue inside, but it's her own tissue. So would you have a rejection from your own tissue? Not at all, right? This is not coming from anybody else, it's coming from this person. So it's not the same tissue, but at least it's taking the place of where tissue was removed. That's a step in a pretty cool direction. Go ahead, yes.
Speaking about that kind of thing, wouldn't it then be possible to read, more advanced technology, of course, be able to take a person, like, to replacement body parts, pretty much, using stem cells to create artificial attachments? What I'm trying to say is use the sort of regenerative medicine in order to create body parts based off of a person's.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yes. Yeah.
In order to create
I understand what you're saying. Yes. Mm-hmm. So they are doing some of this stuff as far as with skin and with other parts like an ear. They're able to grow these parts. Pretty wild things that are happening. What's that?
They do it on rats, right?
Yes. So the field is growing, and it's quite remarkable that we're able to do what we're able to do right now. Go ahead, please.
Where do stem cells come from?
Yeah, so all of the tissues of the body have these stem cells. So that's why I said they'll take these fat cells that they've done the liposuction, and they actually concentrate tissue, the cells of the tissue, getting these stem cells in particular that will produce fat cells. Okay, it's not producing anything other than the fat cells, but we want to be able to take. So this is why they'll take they'll do this controversial with fetuses from aborted pigs, right? Or they'll take umbilical cord cells and such that have stem cells present that can differentiate. And this is why they're trying to work with this stuff and say, how can we work to take these cells that can be diversified and can become other types of cells. So it's still, there's a lot of research and a lot of different things that we're doing to try and do this. So stem cell research is continually on the horizon and really trying to do what they can to, let's see here, to help the healing process of the human body. So junctions. What holds these cells together? These junctions, right? These junctions are able to hold these cells together. So we have tight junctions, adhering junctions, gap junctions. Some of these junctions are just like a spot weld or like a stapler, right? Able to like pull tight. Some act as like little channels to allow for material to move from cell to cell. Okay? These cells have multiple types of these junctions, these connectors. Okay? And here you can see an example of tissue membranes. So a membrane is a covering. So think epithelial tissue. So when you think membranes, think a covering. Okay? So epithelial, think connective tissue. Both of these, epithelial tissue and connective tissue, act as coverings, act as the ability to hold material together or hold an organ, protect an organ, be the outer covering of an organ, that kind of a thing. Or, in the case of mucosa, act as a protective barrier. So think your respiratory, your nasal passage, your oral passage, what's deep within, allowing for air and food passing deep within your body. The mucosa of the body, covered in mucus, protective covering. So here we have these different types of mucous membranes. So mucus, different types of membranes, sorry. Mucus, serous, cutaneous, synovial, right? Synovial you might have heard of if you had any type of issues with like a joint of your body. So synovial joints, these are the type of joints that like your elbow, fingers, like your back, like your spine, cervical spine, lumbar, your shoulders, your hip, synovial joints. These are hollow joints containing synovial fluid. It's this very slippery type fluid that keeps your joints, moving well, right? Like the oil that you might put in a joint, any type of move, like so. When you're thinking of a hinge, if it's squeaky, well, I'll squirt a little bit of oil there and it'll move better. Well, in the case of your synovial joints, we have this synovial fluid, which contains something called hyaluronic acid. We'll talk about this, but hyaluronic acid, slippery stuff, and really good to allow for your joints to move. How many of you move and you have an area, a joint of your body that makes a creaking or a clicking, right? Yeah, it stinks, right? Because as a result of some type of injury, your joint is hypermobile, it's moving too much. And you might have damaged it, you might have damaged the cartilage, you damaged the ligaments, you damaged the actual synovial covering itself, so it's not fully secure and not as lubricated as it should be. Yeah, getting older and having injuries. It's not easy stuff for sure. Synovial joints. Cutaneous membranes, think your skin. Serous membranes, think the coverings of your organs. And mucous membranes, I already talked about. Examples of, so here's that example of that synovial joint. So you see that pink area there? The pink area really represents the covering. It's a synovial membrane. This covering within there produces this synovial fluid. And so it's really important that that fluid is being produced and present within that joint to allow for that joint to move well and not have any type of kind of a thing, right? All right, we looked at the organ systems already, so let's fast forward through that. Okay. We'll take a little bit of time here now. Let's move on in our PowerPoint. And talk a little bit about the skin. As far as just a little bit of information so far. You'll see here that the skin, the largest surface area of any organ. That's pretty cool, right? Think about that. How there was and online you can look at this on YouTube. There's a gentleman who, and I'm blanking on his name right now, but he's done the body exhibits. Have you ever seen the body exhibits advertised or been to them actually? Has anybody ever been to one of those body exhibits? Pretty cool. Pretty wonderful.
You mean it's gonna sound weird. You mean the ones where you walk through like a larger scale version of the body?
No. So when I'm talking about I'm talking about dead bodies, so cadavers that they've done very specific types of preservation in order to, you can see them and like, it's amazing. I'll share this with you. I'll share some images and such.
I've never heard them called body.
Yes, yeah, indeed, yeah. So that's what I'm talking about. And so I've seen an actual, I spent a year in graduate school doing dissection. So we did a full year of gross anatomy and looking, taking one cadaver, half a year just with a full body, and then a half a year with parts of the body. So the brain, spinal cord, the whole nine. And pretty intense, right? Pretty remarkable also because you're able to really learn the human body. And so to be able to see the skin peeled off of a cadaver and see it, this gentleman has it like where he's hanging the skin from like these hooks, and you see how much of a covering it does for the human body. It's sobering. It really is sobering. It's a little creepy too. I mean, I have to say that, right? But it's sobering to see that. It's pretty remarkable. So we're going to talk about the layers and such. The outer layer of your skin is called the epidermis. The outer layer of your skin is called the epidermis. The inner part is called the dermis. And you've all heard of the term subcu or subcutaneous. That's the supportive type of layer. It's not really the skin, but supports the skin. Subcutaneous layer. Here you're seeing just some examples of skin, and we'll talk more in detail regarding the skin, but this is just an introduction. You'll see here that there are, no matter what area of the body, there are specific cells for that area of the body that provides specific functions for that area of the body. Okay? So you'll see here that there are keratinocytes, right? Or keratinocytes. These produce keratin. Okay? Keratin is a protein that is very strong and durable. So your hair, keratin. Okay? Very important. So how about like a rhinoceros horn? That's keratin. Okay? Think of your nails. Keratin. Strong protein. Produced by those type of cells. Melanocytes produce melanin. Melanin is a pigment. It allows for the coloration of our skin and our hair and our eyes, our iris. Melanin, pigmentation. Okay? Very important. And interesting how really genetics program how much melanin our body produces, but we all have pretty much the same amount of melanocytes. It's just genetics tells the melanocytes how much pigment to kick out and what type of pigment. So we have my son-in-law's got red hair and such, and so it's funny because my wife and I brown hair, brown eyes, the whole yard, and we have grandchildren with like blondish hair and red hair for our little boy. So kind of genetics are cool. And then my daughter married a gentleman, and we're expecting our third grandchild. So my daughter looks like me as far as like our. I'm gonna go through backwards. She looks like a but you know, she's got my pigmentation and my hair coloration. But her husband is more darker skin, darker hair, and part Italian and part from the Arabic nations and such. And so their little baby, I'm sure, is going to be quite an interesting combination of those genetics. And just we're excited to see, you know, what comes out. But genetics are wild. They're wonderful. And it's something, you know, really we should be embracing diversity and not, you know, unacceptable of that. That's ridiculous. Sweat glands, oil glands, they're producing sweat, they're producing oil, right? And very important as far as the integument is concerned. Know that oil producing glands are connected to the hair follicles, okay? Sweat glands, we have them all throughout the body. During puberty, we'll actually produce different types of sweat glands that are in the axillary, the armpits, right? As well as the pubic region, the groin, different types of sweat glands, okay? And those kind of glands, those kind of sweat glands are more of an oily sweat type produced, and so they're going to have different types of bacteria which can produce odors, and that's why, like, you know, you can sweat from your armpits, and it's kind of like a different kind of a smell in comparison to just like sweating on top of your head. It's not the same type of sweat. It's a watery sweat on like your forehead or your head or the rest of your body. You'll see here as far as a couple of things that go on regarding the skin, as far as blisters, acne, cold sores, vitiligo. So you'll see here that these cold sores deal with a virus of origin, acne, more of bacterial origin, cancer type of cells, as a result of exposure, overexposure to UV light and such. So yeah, so pretty amazing as far as the different types of pathology. This is interesting here, vitiligo, and it's spelled wrong. It should, there's no I there, vitiligo. Vitiligo is where you can have areas of the melanocytes of your skin that don't produce a pigment. So my wife and my brother-in-law, pigmented like me, they're actually a little bit lighter pigmentation than myself. And they have areas of their skin on their arms that are not pigmented, just like little blotches and such. It's vitiligo. So it's not necessarily only in just darker skin folks, but in skin of all different types. Yeah. And so someone who is a albino, right, is someone who does not have melanocytes that are functioning, right, because they're not producing any pigmentation whatsoever. So their eyes are going to be very strange looking because you're just going to be seeing blood vessels, right? You're not going to have pigmentation of the iris, no pigmentation of the skin, of the hair, right? So very different as far as an appearance, someone who has albinism. We'll end with this for today, and so we'll be done in a few minutes. So, homeostasis. Homeostasis is this stable environment that's present within the human body, no matter what goes on outside of the human body. Okay? So, homeostasis, stable environment within the body, no matter what goes on outside. So, what do I mean by that? Let's see here. So, when we think homeostasis, so think of the different levels of certain values within the body. So, how about blood pressure? How about heart rate, respiratory rate, your breathing rate? How about blood glucose levels? How about sodium ion levels? How about, what else? Potassium levels. Go ahead.
What about heat?
How about what?
What about like body?
Yeah, sure, temperature. Absolutely. So these are all values, and they're just only a few, that we can measure, right? And so there's a set point. So say let's go talk about blood pressure. Or we'll talk about temperature because you mentioned. right? So really, if you've been measuring your temperature over these past COVID time period, how many of us are really close more to like 97? Yeah, most of us are closer to 97 than we are to 98.6, where that was like the value that they were using for a Fahrenheit, for a temperature, healthy body temperature. But we'll just use 98.6 because we know it, okay? So if the body temperature goes above 98.6 or below 98.6, the body will do all it can to adjust so that that body temperature comes up or comes down, so that it's at that set point of that healthy value of 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit. Understood? So how about blood pressure? Say 120 over 80, okay? If our blood pressure goes up or it goes away or down, below, the body will do all that it can to bring it up or bring it down to that 120 over 80 blood pressure, okay? That's the body's homeostatic balance that it's creating. It's trying to maintain these healthy levels. How about, say, for like respiratory rate, like 15 respirations per minute, okay? That's about it, 12 to 15, okay? Little babies, quite different from that, okay? Quite higher. But 12 to 15, if it goes above or below, the body will, through homeostatic mechanisms, bring it up or bring it down, okay? Now, how about if we have demand? Say we're exercising. Is there going to be a greater demand so that we need to have our blood pressure up, our respiratory rate up, our heart rate up, right? So this is all important. So the values for a short period of time can be maintained high, but then after we exercise, we bring it back down, the body does, by this homeostasis. Okay? So these values are always regulated. You've gotten blood work. Everybody here has gotten blood work, I'm sure, at one point in their life. Well, all those values that they're testing for, via homeostasis, your body is maintaining those levels at a healthy rate or not. Because if it's not, then you have some type of pathology, some type of illness, some type of disorder. You could either have been given that, like you got a virus, you received a bacterium, you got an infection, or how about you were born with some type of disease that caused you to produce no insulin or very little insulin. Understood? So homeostasis is a big deal. It's a big deal for the human body to maintain these healthy temperatures. So I'm on blood pressure medication because my body, so genetically, my mom's side of the family, many generations have had issues with maintaining a healthy blood pressure. So it's tough stuff, you know? So I've been on blood pressure medication for a while, and it helps. And it maintains that healthy level of that blood pressure, where my body homeostatically isn't doing it at this point in time. So you'll see here that there are receptors. These receptors will receive information, send it to the nervous system, and the nervous system will say, hey, body, different body parts, do what you need to do in order to increase the blood pressure, or decrease the blood pressure, or increase the blood glucose levels, or decrease the blood glucose levels. Understood? So we have the nervous system working, the endocrine system working with hormones in order to help with this. Many different body systems working. Folks, I would tell you, like working like a symphony, an orchestra, working together to create beautiful music, or in the case of like listening to like the third grade band, create like not so good music. And, you know, there's some type of lack of function going on there. So we're going to end with this negative and positive feedback. So negative feedback, I've mentioned to you negative feedback. It's a good thing. Is negative feedback a good thing? It's a good thing. Okay? Via negative feedback, The human body can bring down levels when they're too high or bring up levels when they're too low. That's negative feedback. So if levels are too high, bring them down. If levels are too low, bring them up. Negative feedback. That's healthy and that's good. Now, positive feedback, not so good. Except for two things, two instances. Childbirth and some type of damage to blood vessels, right? Positive feedback is a good thing in those instances. Other than that, no good. Because positive feedback will continue to go away from the set point. Whether it's too high or too low, positive feedback will go away from the set point, the healthy value. So let's take a look here as far as positive feedback. All right, we'll focus here. And we'll end here for today. And I'll finish this up next week. So a stimulus is received by a receptor. Okay? The receptor will send information to the nervous system. The nervous system will decide what needs to be done with that information that it's received. It'll send it to a muscle or a gland, which will then create a response. Understood? So in the case of childbirth, when the baby's head is engaged and pushing up against the cervix, okay? Each time that the baby's head pushes up against the cervix during contraction, that will send information to the nervous system, to the brain, and the brain will kick out and send information to the endocrine system to kick out oxytocin. Oxytocin will increase the contraction strength and bring the contractions closer together. So what will happen eventually? The baby is born, right? That's a good thing. Continually sends out more and more oxytocin, positive feedback as a result of the pushing of the head up against the cervix. It will then kick out, the brain will kick out more oxytocin to the point where that baby is birthed. In the case of damage to a blood vessel, what will happen is that a blood vessel will be damaged, you'll start bleeding out of the blood vessel, right? So leaking blood. So the body will, in the case of the cardiovascular system, the blood vessels, draw platelets to the area of damage. Platelets will indeed send out chemicals to draw more platelets. So more and more platelets are coming to the damaged area to create a blood clot. That blood clot will seal and close up the damaged vessel. That's a good thing. That's positive feedback. But all other types of feedback, negative feedback, it's only negative feedback is healthy as far as bringing the levels down or bringing them up to the healthy level. All right. So that's it. I've given you a lot of information in a short period of time. I talk pretty fast. I don't mean to do that, but trying to cover a lot of information, and really I'm here to answer questions. So if you have any questions, so I'm going to turn off the recording now. We'll finish this up on Tuesday.